Hello and welcome. This is Alchemistexe, and I have heard that there are several people that used to play the game that are either coming back or considering coming back. And depending on how long that's been, a lot has changed. So I am making this video as a guide to, one, showcase some of the things that have changed if it's been a really long time since you've played, and that's going to be towards the end of the video. And then between now and then, we're going to look at evaluating whether or not you should re-roll or keep your account depending on what your cutoff point might have been, and then weighing some of the options, because if you haven't been playing for a while, you can get returning player bonuses. So we're going to compare that with just the new player bonuses of today. And and then we'll look at some ideas for re-rolling as well, if that's, going to be the option for you. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so first off, I have a graphic of an update schedule, and the date that I've highlighted is the day that Enlightenment and Mementos came out. This was a big game changer as far as progression goes in the game. So if you hadn't played yet and experienced those, I would almost certainly recommend re-rolling, because just so much has been added since then. And then in the description of the video, I'll have a timestamp if you wanted to skip straight to the explanation of how Enlightenment and Mementos work. So let's move on to the next graphic. Okay, and this is the date that Gates 4 and 5 came out, as well as the date that the Sacred Stones units were added to the normal pool. I've highlighted this because at the time before that, they were considered limited units, and now they're just easily acquired, as well as 3 times a day farmable. So if that was a big weight as far as like the value of your old account, that it would have since gone down as far as considering re-rolling. If you quit after Enlightenment was introduced, but before Gates 4 and 5, it's just more of the same. Like, you would know what to expect. So I wouldn't necessarily say reroll. It would depend on what you have, but we'll do more on that later. I do have a specific kind of cutoff date, which I would recommend rerolling based on the unit release. So let's go take a look at that. All right, and here is the unit release schedule from Global, and the red line that I've made here is what I'd consider like the absolute, like if you quit anytime before this, I would definitely say reroll, because the number of limited units that would have been released at that time was very, very small. Like, that would still be limited now. We can see Uzuma on the list, and we can't see Siegfried or Xion, but they would also be on there. So maybe if you had both Siegfried and Xion and you sharded both of them, then maybe keep your account, but like that's, going to be a pretty rare scenario. Otherwise, I think you'd almost certainly be better off re-rolling. And now would also be a good time to mention the whole collab thing, because back in those days, collabs were a lot more common. Like, if you were just looking at this list, we can see units from the Disgaea collab and the Full Metal Alchemist collab. And that dynamic has changed a lot. Collabs are basically non-existent in Global now. I mean, they call Phantom of the Kill collab, but honestly, I really just consider it an event, because it's also Gumi property and it comes back with, very specific regularity. So back in the old days of Alchemist Code, it's fairly common for people to get some collab units, and then they would function as carries. And so since Global pretty much, actually almost universally, never gets reruns on its collabs, that all of those units have since been power crept because they never got Enlightenment, or the ones that did get Enlightenment didn't get the extra gates that were added. So it wouldn't really be a sustainable setup if that was how you got by in those earlier days. And that's part of the reason why I had that cut off, because there were a couple of collabs afterwards, like Attack on Titan and most recently 7 Deadly Sins. But it seems like we haven't gotten any others that Japan has had, and Japan's had a ton since that time period. So I have a very, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in either getting future collabs or investing in collab units. So let's move on to weighing the options between rerolling, and returning player bonuses. Alright, so here are some examples of the returning player bonuses that you can get. Some of it is in the form of a login bonus, just as a one-time, and then they also have special milestones that you can do, and I think it spreads out over the course of like 6 days. Now this isn't everything, but I think this is like a good concise representation of the kind of prizes that you can get for being a returning player. So the question you have to ask yourself is this worth forsaking the slightly better bonuses that you get for just starting a new account in terms of like elemental shards and the selectors that you get? Because one thing that you'll notice at looking at a lot of these prizes is lots and lots of tickets, not so much in the selectors. A lot of kind of convenient stuff for enlightenment. So if you haven't played in a long time, I think what would really ultimately weight the decision is what your library of units looks like and how many of them are limited. In limited and considered like good today, because like I don't want to include like old power crept collab units in that, or limited units like Uzuma. When I say like looking at your library, I should probably specify and say like, S to SS tier good units. Because if all of your units have been power crept, then I don't think any of these bonuses would be enough to sway you. But yeah, just for the sake of comparison though, let's take a look at some of the new player bonuses. That is a long list. One thing that is a good thing to point out that it was not the case when I was a new player, but new players today automatically get Setsuna, and she's amazing. She wasn't particularly hard to get, but it's a nice perk. And then, let's see that. Oh, but the main thing that would really help you out if you're starting out is the selector, and then 150 soul shards worth of selector, which most people would probably want to use on Gerald, assuming they didn't get him in their week of free summons. Because that is like guaranteeing yourself a super hardcore awesome unit. And then assuming you're also re-rolling, then you'd have another really good unit. And then you could use them to just steamroll through a bunch of the story mode to try and get yourself caught up faster. So yeah, I would say that in whether or not you should re-roll or not is largely a function of how old your account is and how power crept it is. Alright then, so say that you are in the camp that it says, alright, it is in my best interest to re-roll. The next question would be, well, what do I aim for? Now, I wanted to make this video this week because I feel like it's a time-sensitive subject with the anniversary around the corner, and that if you wanted to re-roll during this week, there's a very good opportunity to do so because of the extra discount ticket. So you can get extra mileage out of like whatever that initial banner would be that you would do. And there just happens to be a very good banner out right now where, as you can see on this graphic, almost all of these units, except for ones that are collabs and I think except the Dark Phantoms, are available on the 7-step Enlightenment banner. So it's not going to be focused. It's a very wide net, but if you're just looking for a hard carry, it's a good way to go. Because I don't think it'd be hard to amass 2k gems. I think you automatically get 1,500. So at the very minimum, you could do 3 steps. So all of these units are considered SS tier. And then the ones that I highlighted in blue are Genesis units. The ones in red are Magna Historia or global units. And then the purple ones are Phantom of the Kill units. And there's some upsides and downsides to each one of the groups, so I'll just go over that real quick. Genesis units are, in general, very, very strong. The ones with incomplete enlightenment are statted very, very heavily to the point where it's not always even necessary to enlighten them at all. And then the ones that have full enlightenment require a bigger investment, but if you are able to do it, then they're really strong as well. And then the ones with the complete enlightenment do have their shards available in Louis' shop, so that's like your Julias, your Ambrosias, whereas your Emils, your Miras, and Nyxes are not going to be as available shard-wise, but they also don't need the shards as badly, so it's a trade-off. Now, global exclusive units, they are definitely a little bit more accessible in that they all are available in the Louis shop, and then occasionally we get a 3 shard a day for a week quest. So that's more than you can say for Genesis, but it's also uncertain into how long that those shows up. And then there's also varying degrees of needing mementos. And then the Phantom of the Kill units are the most infrequent of this group, but they come with the plus side of there's a generic enlightenment item that you can use to raise them in lieu of soul shards, and that can be really handy too. Although as a new player, it might be hard for you to obtain those shards in the first place because they're not as generous with them as they used to be. But any of those units, especially in the case of Cassius, Tiferet, and Failnaught, very good characters to reroll for. I mean, you can't do it now, but next time POTK comes back, just because they don't need enlightenment at all. So that's something to consider. If you wanted my personal recommendation, I would say Asuka or Adelaide in fire, Dark Mira or Emerus in water, Dark Nyx or Red Six, well it rhymes, in wind, Roxanne or Nyx in thunder, Emil or Siegfried in light, and then Zheng Yi or Failnaught in dark. You know, some of that is time dependent, but in the end, it is up to you. You know, some people reroll hard for someone in particular. Other people just are looking for that carry. But yeah, so that is it for the more data-driven part of the video. So I'm going to move on to the basic mechanics of enlightenment and mementos. So imagine some of you are ready to dip out because you probably already know that. But for the people who really haven't played in a while, this next part is for you. Okay, let's start with an overview of mementos. So at their core, mementos are another gear that you equip on a character, but they're a little bit more complicated than another gear. Because for one, the attributes that they add are going to stack with gears. And then some of them won't show up right away on the character screen, but they will show up once you're in the middle of a battle, when it considers the appearing on map. And then the fun thing about mementos is that they allow interesting party formations because you can apply the bonuses, or they're called group skills, to multiple units, assuming the memento is equipped on one of the units that is what you would call the trigger. Like there's the trigger unit and then the buff unit. Sometimes the trigger unit is also one of the buff units, sometimes not. And mementos can be limit broken just like units, although they only need to be limit broken 5 times. So to max limit break, you need 6 copies total. And then they have their own gauge of XP that they will not accrue on, well, I guess they will randomly on their own, like 1% at a time or 1% for each limit break at a time. And then every time you get to 100% on the meter, you will get a prize for it. And in almost all cases, especially with 5-star mementos and up, that prize is a gear. And a lot of these gears, they're called Vision Clear Rewards, or VCRs for short, are often better than the kind of gears you can get in the gear gacha, and definitely gears you can get for free. There's a reason that I just sometimes I won't even mention the gear banners in my overviews. It's because a large portion of the gears that I use are made up of VCRs, or otherwise quest gears, that kind of thing. And then another fun aspect that mementos can provide is that they can give you a different leader skill. So I picked Soul for a reason, because they can showcase all the aspects I was talking about. And his memento leader skill is one that I use on a regular basis, because this way I can run him with a full Templar team, because A normal leader skill is done either, rainbow or by element. A memento leader skill requires every character to have an applicable memento in the group to have that leader skill. So actually, you know what? It would probably be easier to showcase than to explain it. I know they do it in the news, but it's kind of weird and awkward. I think a more like visceral example would be nicer. I'm going to pick a level but not actually do it. And then once I've showcased this, we'll move on to Enlightenment. Alright, let's get a good thing going here. Let's go back to Soul. So yeah, notice that his memento is glowing. That's because the memento leader skill is active. So if I want a unit, say I got Zane, not glowing because he's not part of the group. The little icons underneath the memento signify a group. Like the Veda Templars is the one under Soul and Holy Guard is the one under Zane. So yeah, let's get somebody else. Say Veer. Oh, now she's glowing. And then so she'll receive the bonus from the leader skill. Alright, so that is it for mementos in a nutshell. Oh, I mentioned the plus sides of mementos. The downside is that you have to summon for them on banners, and so functionally they make the game more expensive. If not in real money, at least in terms of resources that are scarce. And there's a lot of limited mementos too, just as well as limited units. So that's something to be aware of. That's why I was so psyched in my summoning video yesterday, was because I got multiple limited mementos, and that's kind of a rare occurrence for me. Alright, now let's go back to the unit screen and back to my favorite example. So Enlightenment in a nutshell is power creep, which, in this kind of game that is inevitable. And the way that they've chosen to implement that is interesting, I guess. I mean, you could have just expected them to keep raising the max level and keep requiring more and more character soul shards to increase the max level. But I kind of like the way that they actually did it better. So if you remember, actually, I should use somebody who's not enlightened yet as an example of what it costs, because if you haven't played the game since Enlightenment, you might remember those little evolution materials that you use to get characters up to like the 3 stars, up to 4 stars, up to 5 star like evolution. And you needed a few of those, but not like a mountain of them. Well, now you do need a mountain of them, because it's those same types of materials. Okay, I guess I never enlightened Gormalaz, huh? But, yeah, so all of them except for the eye thing are just old evolution materials, and now they're enlightenment materials. And then the eyes you can get from various quests, like in some of the Babel Chronicles levels. They give them away a lot. I have 30 of them right now, and I never particularly hunted after them. Alright, now back to Soul again. This feels like such an ADD video, but it's for the greater good, right? Let's look at the actual screen. If you've seen any of my recent unit reviews, Enlightenment's almost always a factor, because I don't think I've reviewed any units that don't have it. So, for Enlightenment is one of those things where it's kind of the same for every character in an archetypal sense, but it's definitely not the same for every character in terms of the specifics. So just real quick, Gate 1 raises stats, ideally stats that they would want. In like Soul's case, it's HP, P attack, and M attack. And they get stats along the way. There's a total of 5 steps to mastery. So you get stat boosts individually on each step, and then you also get a bonus for mastery. So both Gates 1 and Gate 4 function this way, where it's just all stats. And then 2 and 5 alter a character's skills. 2 alters a passive to give it, hopefully, something good and enhance it. And then 5 will enhance an active skill. But for some jobs or characters, it enhances a reactive rather than a skill they can use. It depends on the character. Sometimes for things like job enchants, it'll actually be the same skill alteration, but since most of the units nowadays function off of unique jobs, that's becoming less and less of a relevant issue. And then finally, gate 3 modifies the leader skill. Usually I add something in terms of like a more general buff. Like from Soul, for example, it took his missile attack by 20 and changed it to all attack. And if you hadn't played before Enlightenment, that might not have existed yet. But all attack is just a flat like damage increase. Like it's on the end of the equation as far as like it just takes the output and increases it by 20%. So that's very nice. Way better than P attack or M attack by 20%. So I guess I can't really showcase the costs of the Enlightenment, but they consume those types of elemental evolution materials as well as character soul shards. And the cost goes up with each increase. So they all start at 5 and they go 10, 15, 20, and then they start to get even higher. The different gates are more expensive than others. Like Mastering 1 only costs 30, and then 2 and 5 are both 50 at the end. So it goes to like 80 for gate 1, 100 for 2 and 5, and I think 90 for both 3 and 4. It's around there. So you need ultimately, and then we haven't even gotten to gate 6, which is going to be 110 once that's released. So you need a lot of shards still. And so that's why the conventional wisdom is that you should never ever use limited character shards for regular limit breaking, because you can use elemental shards for that, and they're just too scarce to not use on Enlightenment, because unless the character is a collab unit, you can only use soul shards. So that's very important to remember. And that was one of the reasons I advocated for the POTK units, because you have that option, like assuming you can get the otherworldly Enlightenment shards. So yeah, that is Enlightenment in a nutshell. It is power creep, but for some characters it can be really fun, because you can start to get unique spins on different character archetypes. So yeah, that is it. I hope that was helpful for all you returning players, and I hope that you can get back into the swing of things and enjoy the game. So yeah, I will see you next time.